when is required. And then finally, the vehicle maintenance basic. Some violations would include, inoperative brakes, inoperative lights, brakes out of adjustment, flat tires, inadequate tire depth, load securement violations. The last three basics, controlled substance and alcohol, hazardous materials compliance, and driver fitness. The controlled substance and alcohol basic would include violations identified roadside, wherein a driver would be impaired due to maybe the misuse of a prescription or over-the-counter drug, possession of alcohol that's not manifested as part of the load, and certainly driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The hazmat basic, some violations would include chipping paper violations caught roadside, placarding or marking violations, load securement violations dealing with hazardous materials, and or load segregation violations. And our seventh basic, the driver fitness basic, would include violations of CDL and medical related regulations, having the wrong class CDL, maybe missing endorsements on the CDL when they're required, violations of restrictions to the CDL, and various medical certification violations. So those are your 7 basics. So after the roadside violations are organized into these basics, they are now measured by SMS. And SMS uses both the violation's severity and certain time weights to analyze any motor carrier's on-the-road performance. I want to point out that in any of those 7 basics, your specific company will be grouped within that basic with similar sized companies. So if you have 2 drivers, 2 vehicles, you're not going to be grouped and compared to, a company like Yellow Freight or Walmart, who may have tens of thousands of drivers and vehicles. All companies are then ranked within each basic from 1 to 100, with a lower number, closer to 1, being your goal, because the higher the percentile, the closer it is to 100, the more indicative it is of a poor safety performance. So let's talk for a minute on violation severity. This is the first of the 2 considerations in addition to the time weight. Violation severity is associated with the likelihood of crash occurrences and crash consequences. All violations are assigned a specific weight based on their severity. It ranges from 1 to 10, with 1 representing the lowest crash risk and 10 representing the highest crash risk relative to other violations in that basic. Finally, when we talk about crashes themselves, they're assigned weights according to their impact, with a greater weight being given to crashes that would involve injuries or fatalities, and a lesser weight given to those that result only in a vehicle being towed with no injuries or fatalities. Now, our next slide might make that a little clearer when we look at some examples of the severity weights in 3 random basics. In the unsafe driving basic, failing to use a seatbelt, whether or not the driver gets a fine, just being cited for it roadside, would be 7 points. All right, assessed. A lane restriction violation, maybe a vehicle being in a lane where it's not allowed to be, 3 points. In the hours of service basic, 14-hour violation would be 7 points. Driver that's placed out of service for something alongside the highway, who continues to drive, would be assessed 10 points. More serious. And then finally, the vehicle maintenance basic, a clearance lamp that is found to be inoperative would result in 2 points, whereas tire fabric exposed on a tire would be 8 points. I also want to point out at the bottom of that slide that if a violation results in the vehicle or driver being placed out of service, meaning they can't move until that violation is corrected, it's an additional 2 points assessed. The second of the 2 considerations would be our time weights. And basically we're talking about the age of the violation. All right, the age of the violation. So the violations that are discovered During roadside inspections, all violations remain on your record for 24 months, but their effect on your scores, on your current scores, is directly related to how old the violations are. So violations discovered during an inspection that happened recently, say in the last couple of months, will have a greater impact on your score within that basic than that same violation that was discovered in that same inspection that may have happened anywhere from 12 to 24 months. Once the inspection and the violations are more than 24 months old, they no longer have any impact on your current CSA percentiles. Our last slide here from my presentation refers back to what we noted earlier, wherein we rank carriers within each basic, similar size carriers, anywhere from 0 to 100, with 0 being your goal and 100 being more indicative of poor performance. Here we have the intervention thresholds for the 7 basics. The basics are listed on the left side of your screen, and the intervention thresholds on the right side of your screen. Now, those thresholds are not your goal. Your goal should be 0 or as close to 0 as you can get. But I want to point out that when you receive a percentile that is equal to or above that intervention threshold, you are likely to be the subject of an FMCSA intervention. And Tim's going to pick up and talk a little bit more about what those interventions might be. Tim?
Thank you, Mark. So one of the important things to remember when we talk about inspections is what Mark is painting that picture is our goal is to have clean inspections, meaning no violations. And in fact, about over half the inspections that are completed nationally actually end up being clean inspection or not having any violations. So it's very possible for you to be inspected and not have any violations. And that is our goal. So when you're thinking and talking to your drivers, you want to encourage them when they do have inspections that they're ready for it, that they're prepared. As a professional driver, they're going to be in compliance when it comes time for that roadside inspection. So your goal as a company would be to have those clean inspections because clean inspections will help bring down your golf score. So for example, let's look at this vehicle maintenance. If you were to log on to the website, you might see a triangle next to one of the 7 basics. And that means that your basic, in this example, the vehicle is elevated. It is above that 80% threshold. Let's say for this company, it was at a 89%. So now what's going to happen? How does FMCSA look at this data and what do we do? Well, one of the early contacts that we would have on the next slide is going to be a warning letter. Anytime a company is elevated in their score above our threshold levels, you're going to get a letter in the mail kind of putting you on notice. And that's our first point of contact with you. It lets you know that you're above the threshold, what steps you can kind of take to make improvements. It's also going to inform our roadside officers in law enforcement to do increased targeted roadside inspections because the data is telling us that you're having problems in maintenance. So we're going to want to look additionally at your vehicles as you're going up and down the highway to make sure that we're operating safely. Following this early contact, a company could be subject to an investigation. Someone like Mark, who you just heard from, is an investigator, and they will make contact with the company if they have elevated scores in those basics. And we can do what we call an off-site investigation, where we call you and ask you to provide documents to us to conduct our investigation, or the investigator will go on site and they might do a more focused review where we only look at certain areas of your operation, maybe just your maintenance and hours of service. Or we can do what we call a comprehensive, where maybe you have so many problems in so many different areas, we are going to look at the entire safety compliance operations of your business and do that comprehensive review. Following our investigations, the next step of action that we can take are civil fines. And that is not our goal. Our goal is to get compliance. But if you have severe enough in a pattern of violations, they can result in civil penalties being issued against your company based on our investigations that are completed. So we're kind of hoping not to get to that point. And the last step, if we need to take it, is also issuing an out of service order to a company. If a company has serious safety issues that are a concern to us, we'll put the company on notice that they could be shut down from operating if they don't correct the safety issues that have been identified in the compliance review. So these are some of the more interventions that we can take based on that data, based on your CSA scores. So now I want to kind of turn it over to Ron Uriah from Pitt, Ohio. And Ron's going to talk a little bit about the industry perspective. You just heard from FMCSA and how we use the data and the interventions that we do. Now Ron's going to kind of start us off and talk about it from an industry perspective, maybe see it from the lens that you look at this data and information. So Ron?
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be part of this presentation. And I'm just going to give a brief outline of why CSA is about safety from an insurance and insurability perspective. Many of you are small or new to the industry, and these are just areas you're not thinking about. You've got other issues to think about, but CSA is important whether you're established, whether you're a small carrier or a large carrier. And these are areas that your customers are going to look at, and it's going to affect your profitability and your ability to operate. So we'll look at a couple key points here: insurance and insurability, impact of poor CSA scores. There'll be some suggestions for success and how to maintain a CSA safety culture. Now, insurance, again, is about safety. CSA is a record of as Tim and Mark explained, of your experience on the highway, your driver's performance in 7 basic areas. Even though some of these areas are not published, and none of them are published right now, but all the information from your 7 basics are going to be asked for by your insurance company, whether it's your broker, your representative, but they're going to take this information and report it to their underwriters. And again, it's one of the tools. There's many tools used by the underwriters, but it's going to affect your rate of insurance. And motor carrier insurance, there's not many people out there to insure motor carriers. It's limited. You don't see commercials on television like all the car insurance companies. Every 5 minutes, there's a break in a program seeing an insurance commercial. There's not many insurance companies willing to insure commercial motor vehicles. There's no obligation for them to provide insurance. They can refuse insurance, or they can insure you at a higher rate. And again, your CSA scores are going to affect what your rate is or your ability to obtain insurance. They're going to ask questions about your CSA experience. They're going to want feedback on your safety management practices. Only the safest fleets are going to be insured. And again, as a new fleet, you have no experience in CSA, so you want to get some good inspections. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You need to establish a good history. And again, a positive history means a good risk. Good history will lower your premiums. And again, it's going to help you defend claims should you be involved in an accident and there be litigation. The impact of poor CSA scores are going to result in increased inspections, higher costs, and reduced profits. Obviously, the insurance company can maybe cancel or decline coverage. It can cover you at a higher premium, or it can create additional issues should there be litigation. Because even though you're in an accident and maybe you're sued and your CSA scores have nothing to do with that event, plaintiff attorney is going to bring it up and use it against you. They're going to try to prove that you don't have a safe operation, whether it had anything to do with that accident or not. So it's going to increase your cost and maybe potentially your ability to settle a claim. And again, that's what your insurance company is going to be looking at, those risk factors. Your customers are going to question your CSA scores because there's been a lot of history, especially recently, the last several years, about third-party liability. So your customers have a choice. They're going to choose the safest carriers. And again, although this information is not published, your customers or your brokers or your shippers are going to ask you what your CSA scores are. And again, you don't have to tell them, but again, they don't have to do business with you. So again, poor scores can indicate problems in your operation. And again, they're going to choose the safest carriers. So how can you keep a good operation? Well, read these, know and understand the 7 basics. Monitor your scores. First of all, verify they're your scores and know what's going on with your fleet, with your drivers. Investigate the cause. Ask your drivers, make sure you have a policy that your drivers immediately report violations. Review your violations and look for patterns. Identify any deficiencies and make the corrections in your operation. And, don't just cover this with your drivers, cover it with your operational people, cover it with your mechanics, and make sure you review the driver's PSP scores when you hire them. Pre-employment screening is something new, but a driver's history follows him or her. Their violation and accident rate will follow them. So make sure you hire, what you're hiring, and again, the potential for the effect on your CSA scores and what your insurance people are going to look at. Establish a CSA safety culture. Practice safety management. Educate your people, your drivers, your operational staff, your dispatchers. They need to know why this is important. And again, nobody wants to have their truck sitting at a roadside inspection. But again, better your history, and again, cooperate with the individuals at roadside. They're doing a job, you're doing a job, they understand your job, and you need to understand theirs. Your goals are the same: safe trucks on the highway. Explain this to your people, educate your people, get involved, and let your people know that bad scores are going to affect your business, going to increase your insurance rates, and it may affect your customers and your ability for business growth. Teach proper pre and post trip inspections. It's not difficult. You can look in the regulations. You can ask your local mix-app officers. They'll gladly come in and go through the proper procedures with your drivers. And it's an opportunity to ask questions and get some advice. And one thing, in a major violation out there you're going to see on the highway is the seatbelts. Make sure you have a policy for your drivers to have the seatbelts on in a commercial vehicle. That's the first thing an inspector is going to look at. Approach the inspections in a positive way. Have the documentation ready. Teach your drivers this. License, insurance information, any other vehicle information, hazmat permit if you haul hazardous materials, and so on. Get involved with peer groups. In Pennsylvania, there's a peer group roundtable that meets every month in Bedford, PA. We're doing a meeting virtually now since the pandemic, but again, it's people from the industry, it's people from enforcement. They just get together to roundtable and ask questions, and an opportunity to find things out. There's no pressure, nobody's taking notes, and you can really learn from your peers. Get involved with the Truck Association. PMTA puts on several good seminars a year. It's an opportunity for you to learn. And again, talk among your peers. And every month, the Safety Management Council has a safety meeting. And it's a good way to learn how to, do well in this industry. And again, just remember, customers have a choice, and they're going to choose the safest carriers, and those carriers that demonstrate that they have safety management practices in place. Make sure you know your 7 basics. Make sure you can explain the results. And again, if you get an alert status or something, there's a way to fix it, but you got to react to it. So that's a brief overview. Each one of these points could be a entire seminar. But again, from an insurance and customer perspective, CSA compliance is very important. Thank you.
And briefly, John Rigney, our Director of Safety for the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association, has some things he wants to add to Ron's presentation points as well. John?
I guess you have to unmute first. I'll try not to duplicate things here, but basically, how does CSA affect you as a company? Well, if you're involved directly in transportation as your business, or indirectly moving equipment around to do your job, and you're regulated because of the size of the trucks, you not only have to deal with items that the Small Business Association can help you with actually running your business, but you have to know all the regulations concerning highway safety. And while the Small Business Association can help you with your business needs, the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association can help you with all your regulatory issues, provide you with training and education. The first thing you need to do is, if you don't have one, is develop a very strong safety policy, instruct your drivers and your staff concerning the policy and the results if they do not follow the policies. Stress good, effective pre and post trip inspections, because when the inspectors bring up your DOT number at the roadside, even if you're not in alert status, they're going to check the out of service rate for both your truck and your driver. And they'll click on the details, and it'll tell them what issues you've had trouble with, and they'll key in on those. And if you haven't addressed them and they continue to be a problem, then you're going to have costly repairs on the side of the highway, which can severely affect your profit and loss statement. In addition to that, as Ron stated, the shippers and brokers look at your CSA score. They only want the safest carriers because they're commodities. They want them to get there in a safe manner, on time, and to be usable when they get to the end. One area that's really hot now is technology. There's so much information available from these vehicles that can help you monitor your performance of your drivers every day. And the best way to keep that safety culture going is to monitor your drivers through the technology that's available to you now through the ECM of the vehicle, plus the ELD. If you are on an ELD system, that gives you a lot of information. And coming from industry, in my last position, we had cameras in the trucks, and they were one of the best systems that we added to the vehicle, because it gave the safety manager a way to monitor the performance of the driver every minute of the day. And just through critical events, whether it's a hard braking incident, following too closely, that kind of speeding, that kind of thing. And you want to follow up on these critical events with meaningful dialogue and documentation with the drivers. And I can tell you, the previous company that I worked with when I first retired from the state police, my job was to monitor the CSA scores of the carriers that we would broker loads to, and those that didn't fit the bill didn't get the jobs. So end the story, short and sweet. CSA is important, and it's something that you want to know about, in addition to all the other rules and regulations that apply to your companies. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you, Ron. So we're now at a point where we can kind of open up the floor to any kind of questions that you might have. Keep in mind the discussion that we're having here today about CSA is more that 30,000 foot level view. We didn't really get into a lot of the details on it. Our intent here today was to provide that overview to give you a sense of what this is. Maybe you've heard about CSA, from different sources and talking to other people. Maybe you never heard about it. So we kind of wanted to do a little intro to CSA to give you a better perspective on how the program works. And really, as we heard from Ron and John, how to leverage it from an industry perspective. So if you do have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat box here, as Brandon will kind of monitor that to see if we do have any. We did have a couple of questions entered into the chat box. The one reference, Ron said something about seatbelts and how seatbelts violations can result in an inspection. And to kind of what Ron was mentioning on that is, when a driver is going down the road, they're required as a professional driver to wear their seatbelt. And we encourage our law enforcement to pull over drivers who are not wearing their seatbelt. And the reason for that is simply because it does save lives. And drivers who wear their seatbelt, it reduces fatal crashes involving the large truck. And really think about it, it's for your driver's perspective. If they're wearing their seatbelt, they're going to be safer if they have to make an evasive move. If they're going to be in a crash, that seatbelt's going to go a long way in saving their lives. And we're all about reducing fatalities and injuries. So wearing that seatbelt is really critical and should be expected of a professional driver. I will also add, drivers that don't wear their seatbelt probably don't have too much of an interest, I would think, on operating safely on the highway when it comes to speeding, following too closely, lane changing, things like that. I think it really sets the tone when drivers get in their vehicle and the first thing they do is, click it by putting on their seatbelt and kind of setting the tone for that trip for the rest of the day. So keep that in mind, the importance of seatbelts. And we do encourage law enforcement to conduct inspections on drivers who are not wearing their seatbelt. Another question, and I might pass this over to Ron. Ron, the question came up, from my insurance carrier, what could I expect from them to kind of help me when it comes to CSA and maybe developing a safety plan? Can I leverage or talk to my insurance carrier about what opportunities they might kind of present?
I would take advantage of everything the insurance company could give me. They should have a lot of material on safety management practices. They should actually have a criteria established of the acceptable number of violations and crashes of the drivers of the people they insure. They should have parameters and expect their customers to stay within them parameters. For example, what's acceptable? Maybe 3 minor accidents and 2 violations in the past 36 months. And that's kind of high. Usually it's probably less. So that's something that needs to be discussed with the ownership and the management of the company. And those kind of parameters should set, look, these are the insurance company's rules for us, and we have to enforce them. And you can make them more stringent. But again, if you look into federal regulations too, there's acceptability and non-acceptability for the number of violations and accidents. So I think to start with a safety program, you have to set a rules. You have to have rules for your drivers, and they have to understand why they are there, and that you as a carrier are liable for their actions, and that can cost you a lot of money sometimes. So again, not just educate, but communicate to your people. Have discussions, whether monthly, and every operation's different. And some carriers have the advantage of seeing their drivers every day, and they can talk to them maybe weekly or monthly. I would encourage at least a brief monthly safety meeting, 10 or 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be long, but let them know what's important from the top down, and go over these things. And you got to tell them why it's important. It's not a personal thing against one driver. It's a must. It's a must from the industry. It's a must to keep your customers and the insurance company happy. So, but work with your insurance company. Again, talk to your peers. Work with the association. Get with similar operations and get involved and ask them, what do you do? What kind of programs do you have? And again, we all share in this industry. I could tell you from my perspective. I probably have known every vice president of safety of every major carrier you see on a highway, because association with Pennsylvania Motor Truck and American Trucking Association. And we talk about things and we share things. You share things in safety. It's not like sales or business. We do share things, and we all make our operations better because of that. So, take advantage and get involved.
Thank you, Ron. And, just to kind of piggyback on what Ron was saying too, reward your drivers. If they, you have a program, perhaps maybe, we don't have any crashes in a month or in a quarter, is there an incentive program to create for your drivers? Some companies, when it comes to inspections, if they get a clean inspection, the driver will get, $25 or a $50 gift card. They kind of will see the benefit of and understand CSA, the impact, and creating that little reward system can go a long way on and help making your company a safer operating, and really kind of help your business in the long run by investing in your drivers and sharing that knowledge, and perhaps a reward program that you think would fit your business to help them out. So,
Tim, even give them a hat, give them a gift card. The reward system, the annual safe driving or mileage awards, they go a long way. The drivers will fight and they'll challenge you on accidents, and they want their rewards. It's important to recognize them because their job is hard. They not just have to drive safe, they're working for you and your customers too.
So
there's a couple of questions that have, yep, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Tim. There's a couple of questions that have popped into the chat and the question and answer box. And I'm going to answer a couple of them because I know the answer to these. We will be sending the PowerPoint to everyone that registered, so you'll get a copy of this presentation and some other materials as well. Also, if you missed the one we did in January, you can see the recording of that on our website, pmta.org. But it looks like one of the most common questions we're getting so far, Tim, is where can we find our CSA scores?
Right. Yeah. So you want to kind of, now find out your scores under the CSA. So you'll get a copy of the presentation, kind of that first slide that I went over. It had the link for CSA where you can go and click on it. It had that home screen page. You go to that and you can start looking at your information. You do have to have like a PIN number and such to set that up. If you have any difficulties with that, you can reach out to me. You'll see my email at the end of the slide deck here, which you'll also get a copy of the slide deck, but we'll pass that information along. So do go to the CSA website. It's on your screen now, csa.com, fmcsa.dot.gov. That's the website to go to where you can kind of begin to look at your information, log on to the secure site, and start beginning to kind of break down your data. One of the neat, I think, abilities of CSA, you can print some of that information and provide it and put it in front of people so they can actually see the data themselves when you want to kind of share it with them. Another question we got was, violations might be impacting my insurance prices badly. Is there a way to dispute the violations? Which was a great question. So on this slide, you see there's a data queues, data correction challenges. If you feel like you have a violation that was cited that was cited incorrectly by the officer, the data queue program, you go to this link and you can enter a challenge into the system. So for example, let's say your driver was pulled over and the officer required that driver to have an electronic logging device in their vehicle. But because you're a local driver, you're exempt from that requirement. You want to challenge that citation. You go to the data queue website, you'll put in the information that you're challenging. And once you submit it, it goes to the state where the violation was documented. So let's say you operate in Maryland, you would conduct the data queue, submit it, it would go to Maryland, and that office would look at it and they would communicate via email in the data queue website and get back to you after they look over your challenge. You submit evidence or information to kind of challenge the issue, but you do have the method to go through the data queue process to challenge any violation. Brandon mentioned getting a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. We're also going to submit to you a one-page data queue page to kind of help explain that program so you get a little bit more clarity on it if you do want to challenge a violation. Um,
Thanks, Tim. Can you see the question and answer box? Do you see the questions that are, well, there's two in there.
I do, and I think we kind of covered them all. You talked about the January workshop being available online at the PMTA website. And we'll get out, like we said, a copy of this presentation to everybody who attended here today. So, all right.
Okay, Xenia has asked, what are the steps to follow in case a driver gets a ticket or a violation? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm reading the rest of that question. It does look like we've answered that. Good, good.
Okay. All right, so we got just 2 or 3 more slides just to kind of wrap up. So Brandon, if you can kind of move on. So I just want to really, one, thank you for attending here today. But again, encourage you to take some proactive steps when it comes to your business and also your safety side. You heard from Robin, the Small Business Development Center, and Andy at SCORE, the programs that they have. I can't stress enough the great value that you can get and gain from working with those folks. So look them up, reach out to them, help them develop your business. They're there to help you succeed in your operations and continue to move forward in your business. We talked about safety in the CSA. It really does start with those that are at the top, the ownership, those that are running the business. If your employees see safety is important, that's going to trickle down to the drivers. And as Ron was saying, communicate with your drivers. Meetings, handing out information, sharing your knowledge, keeping that in front of them is a very, very important tool to share with your drivers. And figure out what's going to work best for your company. We talked about the reward program. Maybe that will work for you in a different way. Maybe gift cards won't work, but maybe giving out t-shirts and hats and some other accessories might be better. But know what will make your employees kind of tick and take interest in safety and helping make it a priority. Again, a safe business is going to be a profitable business at the end of the day if we can merge these two together. And remember, I talked about work zones, right? We have our work zones coming up next week. So we're going to send you a flyer with the PowerPoint. Please provide that to your drivers. Let them know about Work Zone Awareness Week. Pennsylvania is a top 10 state for fatal crashes involving large trucks and work zones. And overall, 33% of all fatal crashes in a work zone involve a commercial motor vehicle. So we're going to see increased enforcement and education, billboards and such next week to try and get that message out as we head into the construction season across the country. And finally, we do have our next workshop coming up in July. We're going to be focusing in on maintenance. That's a key topic. So now maintenance can impact your CSA score. We're going to have some speakers talk a little bit about what we look at from a roadside inspection program, and then what from a business standpoint you can do to improve your maintenance operation. What are some of the best practices that are available to kind of help you invest in your maintenance program to help your business thrive and minimize the violations, perhaps vehicles being placed out of service as well. You can register at the bottom there at the PMTA website. You can also find the January workshop that we did on driver behavior, and this session will be posted at a later date as well. So you can point people in that direction. Go to the PMTA website and you'll be able to find the seed workshops as well. If you do have any questions, please reach out to us. We're putting here all the websites for each of the different organizations that have helped put this workshop on. My email is down there below. So if for some reason you don't get the PowerPoint, send me an email. If you have questions about something we talked about it, please send me an email. I'll get back to you and work with you on any kind of question that you may have. So be on the lookout for the PowerPoint and additional documents that we will share with you here today. I want to thank all our presenters for their time and commitment to this project. I want to thank you all for attending as well and taking time out. We promised to have this done within an hour, and we are meeting that goal. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I hope you found it of value, and we look forward to seeing you in July for our next SEED workshop. Have a great day. Thank you.